Who you have the Steelers taking first, Dane, and at what selection? What number?
Well, right now, Pittsburgh is slated to pick 12. It's funny. They before Monday Night Football, they were actually going to pick fifth, but with that win, now they're down at 12. And so, we'll see how things shake out the rest of the season and where they ultimately end up. But right now they're at 12, and in this mock draft, my first of the year, I had Keely Ringo, the corner from Georgia, falling to them at 12. Which I think that when you look at what the Steelers like to do on defense, with the amount of zone that they play, mixing in some man, I think Keely Ringo is a great fit. And this is a guy that 6'2", 210, and he's going to run on the 4.3s. I mean, he is a freak athlete. Now, as a cover man, there's still some areas where he needs to get better. He's only a redshirt sophomore. He's a young player. But I think most people remember him as the guy that made the clinching interception in the national title game against Bryce Young, returned it for a touchdown to basically clinch that game. And then, he's a guy that has all the talent in the world. And you feel like he's as good as he is now. He's still pretty far away from his football ceiling. And so if he were to be available at 12, I think that he'd be definitely on the short list for the Steelers.
I'm interested in a Penn State guy and a Pitt guy as well. You mentioned corner. Joey Porter Jr. announced he's coming out. Where do you have him rated?
Well, I heard from Steelers fans on that one because I had Joey Porter going 13, a pick later. Would the Steelers go with Joey Porter over Ringo, because of the connection, the bloodlines, all that type of thing? That's obviously only something the Steelers will be able to answer, but Joey Porter's a good player. He has the size, the length that you love to see at the position. Long, physical, athletic. That's a great place to start. He can be patient and press. He can jam you. He can play off the line. Now he's a little more physical than you want. He's going to attract attention from officials because of the contact that he makes, but you'd rather a corner be aggressive and you try to reel him back as opposed to the opposite where he's not aggressive enough. So with Joey Porter, you look at the movement skills, the length, that's going to land him in the first round. And so I think he's another player that could be in the mix there for the Steelers, wherever they end up picking in that top 15 to 16 range.
That's one of Mike Tomlin's favorite things. He'd rather say "whoa" than "sick 'em," right? Isn't that what you're saying? You'd rather be able to back him off instead of telling him to be more aggressive, right?
No, exactly, and that's at the corner position. You want guys to be aggressive. It's okay to learn, because I think you have to learn that discipline of playing the position. But you'd rather your guys be aggressive to go get the football, to go make plays. You don't want guys that are timid out there. So now, once you get them onto the team, then it's up to the coaches to reel it back a little bit. So he understands, okay, based on my reads, based off of, what my route instincts, what I think the offense is trying to do, you can get better in that area. But that aggressiveness is more of an instilled trait, and I think he definitely has that, and probably from watching his dad all those years.
The Pitt kid, Cansey, just won ACC Defensive Player of the Year. Pretty high company. I believe Aaron Donald won that when he was at Pitt. Cansey is an underclassman, but I think everybody expects him to come out. Where might he go?
Well, he's really interested because he's undersized, and this isn't like an Aaron Donald situation where even though Donald was undersized, he was still a top 12 pick. Cansey's not quite on that level, but he's a guy that it's impossible not to like him when you watch him because of that lateral quickness. He can burst through gaps. He's got the play range, so he can make plays outside of his square. Chase down the ball carrier, and then against the run. He is physical, so he can stack blocks. And so the big question will be just how teams feel about the lack of size and his ability to anchor at the point of attack, his ability to hold up versus the power of offensive linemen at the NFL level. And so, I think it's interesting because when you watch him on tape, it's kind of like, okay, where is he lining up on this play? Because he'll be anywhere from the nose to the edge outside of the tackle. And so they lined him up everywhere just to kind of bring him from different angles. If he does declare, we're talking about a guy that's going to be working to get into that top 100 range. I think the measurables will work against him a little bit just based off of what NFL teams want at that position. But the tape speaks for itself, and I think a lot of teams will trust that.
Dane Brugler of The Athletic on the Nemacolin fan hotline. Nemacolin around every corner creates real-life magic for guests. You can text us as we go along on the Edgar Snyder & Associates fan text line, 412-928-9370. Edgar Snyder & Associates reminds you to text responsibly. Let's just say a little hypothetical here, Dane, that Kenny Pickett was available in this year's draft. Where would he go? How would he be ranked among quarterbacks?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that this is a quarterback class that's very it's a little different because each one of these quarterbacks you can poke holes in. With Bryce Young out of Alabama, he's a complete outlier in terms of size. He's going to be under 5'11", and he's going to be under 200 pounds. That is, you just don't see that in NFL quarterbacks, especially an NFL quarterback that you're considering drafting top 5, maybe number 1 overall, like he is in the mock draft. C.J. Stroud, I think there's a lot to like about him. He's an accurate rhythm passer, very smart player. You do worry about his struggles to create. And then with Will Levis at Kentucky, who was the third quarterback in my first-round mock, he's a prototype in terms of physical traits, the size, the mobility, the arm strength, an elite competitor. Toughness is off the charts. It's just the accuracy, the decision making, the way he sees things. It has to be better. It has to be quicker. And it's just, where does that land him? So I think he would likely be in the conversation to compete with Will Levis to be that next quarterback off the board. It's just, would a team go with a guy like Kenny Pickett, who sees the field really well and is more of that veteran presence, who can step in and you feel like you know what you're getting with Kenny Pickett, or are you going to go with the high upside guy, the Will Levis, who has maybe one day, if everything clicks right, he could be that Josh Allen. But that would take everything going right, and the odds of that happening just don't feel very high. So I think he would not be. I don't think he'd go higher than Bryce Young. I don't think he'd go higher than C.J. Stroud. But he would be in that next mix, and it would be up to the team if they want the high upside guy, or a guy that had the higher floor like a Kenny Pickett.
Dane, a lot of people around here, this town, want an offensive lineman, a tackle, maybe a left tackle to guard, protect Pickett for the next 10 years. I know the Penn State kid was highly regarded, right? Young and raw, and has decided to go back to Penn State. I'm a Northwestern guy. Is the guy, my Northwestern guy, high on your list?
Yeah, and it's funny because as I was mapping out my mock draft over the weekend, the Steelers, they were set to pick 5th, and I had Olu Fashanu, the Penn State left tackle, penciled in at number 5 to the Steelers. And then, on Monday, he announced he's going back to school for his junior season. Where I think the world of Fashanu. I think he's going to be a big time talent, even if he's not coming out this year. Next year, he's still going to go very high. And then, the Steelers obviously won on Monday night, so they're not picking as high. But now they're maybe more in the discussion of drafting a Peter Skoronski from Northwestern, who, tell you what, he's going to get beat up throughout the draft process because, we talk about arm length with offensive tackles. If you need at least 33-inch arms. That's what you hear from, when we talk about these tackles. Skoronski's going to come out probably 32 and a half. He just does not have the length that you traditionally want. But when you watch the tape, you know what? The way he processes, the way he moves, his play strength, it's all off the charts at left tackle. And so some teams will be on board with it and say, look, I'll trust the tape. This guy can play tackle. We'll try him there. If it doesn't work out, we'll move him inside. He'll be an outstanding guard. Where other teams are just going to look at the length and say, no way, we can't do it. He's an outlier. He'll be an immediate guard for us. And so, it'll be an interesting debate from team to team that we'll talk about throughout the draft process. But regardless, this is a really good player who's going to go somewhere in the top 15, 16 picks. And then I think the top true left tackle is Paris Johnson at Ohio State, a really athletic big man. You love the redirect. You love the way he can recover. This is his first year as a starter at left tackle, and so there are some issues, but they're all fixable. They're all coachable, and I think they're more of a result of the inexperience and not a lack of ability. So Paris Johnson, he was at number 7 overall, I believe, in the mock draft. So I still think he's going to go pretty high He's a player that I think is easy to like because of his traits.
So, quarterbacks included, but everybody included, is there a widely acknowledged best player in this draft?
I think it comes down to two players, and that's Will Anderson, the pass rusher from Alabama, and Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle from Georgia. Both these guys are potential cornerstones of your team, guys that can make an immense impact. Will Anderson, last year as a sophomore, had one of the best seasons I've ever seen from a defensive player. He had over 100 tackles as a defensive end, outside linebacker, and he had 34 tackles for loss, which was 12 more than number 2 in the nation. So in this year, he's seen a lot more attention, from blockers, a lot of chips, a lot of offenses working against him. So the production hasn't been as high, but he's still top 5 in the nation in pass rush percentage. So Will Anderson is a freak in nature. And the thing is he's an even better run defender. So to me, he's the best player in this draft. But there are some teams that look at Jalen Carter and say, you know what, if he can give us that interior disruption, that's more valuable. That's harder to find, from that position. And so Jalen Carter from Georgia, with his body control, his power, he is going to be the number 1 player in this draft for several teams. I can promise you that. So if the team at number 1, say it's the Houston Texans, they're the overwhelming favorite to pick one. If they're not convinced with one of these quarterbacks, would not be surprised at all if they went Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. And I tell you what, there's a lot of buzz about the 2024 quarterback class, and that's something that will play a factor into these teams picking top 10 and whether or not they go for a Bryce Young or a C.J. Stroud or Will Levis, or if they say, you know what, let's be patient. Let's wait for Caleb Williams or Drake May or Quinn Ewers or J.J. McCarthy or these intriguing quarterbacks we'll be talking about at this time next year. So it's going to be a really interesting top 10. Who goes 1? Where do the quarterbacks come off the board? So we'll plenty of time to figure it out, but it'll be fun to talk about it throughout the process.
The best guy I've seen is Drake May, and I don't think that there's a generational quarterback in this year's draft. I don't know if you agree with that, but he to me could be one. Am I right about that?
I would agree with you, absolutely. He looks like Justin Herbert. I mean, he has the size, he has the athleticism. The arm strength is very easy for him. What he's doing this year has been a lot of fun to watch. And I tell you what, between him and Sean Payton, who's working in the media now, he came out and said Caleb Williams is a generational quarterback. So and Sean Payton knows a thing or two about quarterbacks. So it's something that every time I talk with my contacts in the league about where these quarterbacks are going to end up, it almost seemingly comes to talking about next year and how teams that's going to be a factor. I mean, last year, a reason we only had one quarterback go in the first 73 picks were a lot of teams decided to be patient and said, you know what, instead of reaching on a Malik Willis or a Desmond Ridder in the late first round or early second round, we'll be patient and we'll wait for next year. And even though this quarterback class was better than last year, next year's quarterback class looks even better than this year. So it's going to be a talking point throughout the process.
The Steelers have been chasing an inside linebacker ever since Ryan Shazier got hurt. They tried Devin Bush, traded up to get him. It doesn't look like he may even be back next year for his 5th year. How about inside linebackers?
Yeah, I don't know that there's it's necessarily going to be a strong inside linebacker class in the first round. I like Trenton Simpson from Clemson. He's a really athletic player. And no matter if you're asking him to cover, if you're asking him to be a blitzer, he can do all of it because of his athletic gifts. I like Drew Sanders a lot from Arkansas. He was also in my first round mock. He's 6'5", 235, really competitive, explosive athlete. There's a lot of things to like about his traits. If they didn't go linebacker in the first round and they waited till day 2, a guy like Henry To'oTo'o from Alabama in the 3rd round would be a guy that would make sense. His ability to see what's happening as it unfolds and then react is really impressive. Now, you wish you were bigger. You wish you were a little bit longer, a little bit stronger. He's a little bit undersized, and that's what you worry about him. That's why we're talking about him as a 3rd rounder, not a 1st rounder. But his mentality, his instincts, the way he sees the game, it's off the charts. I mean, he's an extension of Nick Saban on the field with his football knowledge. And so because of that, a team's going to pull the trigger somewhere on day 2 with him and trying to plug him in, see what he can do.